Good evening and welcome to the second of our two candidate programs focusing on the elections for the Cerro County Board of Supervisors. I'm Bob Fisher, the news director for the Koloff Media radio stations here in Mason City, 103.7 The Fox at 98.7 Kiss Country. I'm also in charge of the news website, northiowanow.com. I hope that you will help get out the word about our new efforts of bringing you local news throughout our radio stations and our website. Throughout the next week or so, leading up to Election Day, we'll have more information regarding candidates that you'll see on your ballot for the November general election on northiowanow.com. Tonight's program focuses on the candidates for the 3rd District. Now, that includes all of Mason City's 1st Ward, the 2nd, 3rd Precinct to the 2nd Ward, the 1st Precinct to the 4th Ward, as well as the communities of Rock Falls and Plymouth and the Falls and Lime Creek Mason North Townships. Let's now meet our candidates. Incumbent Democrat Lori Meacham Ginapp has been employed by Cerro County for the last 18 years, 16 years in the auditor's office, and the last 2 years as a full-time county supervisor. Lori has been a very active member through the many different organizations, including 8 years of service on the Central Springs School Board, 10 years on the Plymouth Betterment Committee, an ambassador on the Mason City Chamber of Commerce, a member of the League of Women Voters, and she also sits on a committee to help with food insecurity and food access, helping to put food pantries around Cerro County. Republican Carl Ginapp is a native of Mason City, graduating from Mason City High School and North Iowa Area Community College with degrees in mechanical design and fire science. Carl worked for the Mason City Fire Department for 28 years before retiring last month in the rank of deputy chief. Carl and his family live on an acreage northeast of Mason City where he raised purebred sheep for over 20 years. Some of his past activities include being deputy director of the North Iowa Hazardous Materials Emergency Response Team, member of the Cerro County Emergency Operations Center, president of the Iowa Lamb and Wool Production Board, and a vice president of an International Sheep Association. He's also been committee chair within the North Iowa Addiction Prevention Alliance and a member of the Iowa Bureau of Emergency and Trauma Services Service Area 2 leadership team representing EMS. He's also a volunteer firefighter and EMT with the Plymouth Fire Department. Candidates, thank you once again for agreeing to sit down with me tonight for answering some of our questions. Now, to alleviate some of the confusion, the candidates have agreed that I allow this explanation to be read at this time. Lori Meacham Ginapp was previously married to Carl's dad's cousin, and because she's not married to him anymore, the two candidates are technically not related. And for the ease of following along in our program, the candidates have agreed to the informality of me calling them each by their first name. Candidates, once again, thank you for agreeing to sit down to discuss the issues, and let me quickly go over what our format is for our discussion tonight. A blind draw was held prior to the start of tonight's event to determine who will give the first answer to the first question and give the first of the closing statements. I have a list of questions and topics that we'll be discussing this evening. That list was not provided ahead of time to either candidate, but the candidates were allowed to make suggestions ahead of time regarding questions and topics that they'd like to see included in our discussion. Questions will be addressed in an unbiased manner to each candidate in a rotating format. There will not be a hard time limit on the length of the answer a candidate can give to allow the candidate not to feel rushed in giving their answer. But as moderator, I will encourage candidates to wrap up their thoughts if the answer is extra lengthy, in the interest of trying to allow both candidates an equal amount of time to respond, as well as in attempting to get as many questions as possible in during this program. With most questions, we'll ask each candidate to take a turn in answering the question. I feel there needs to be further discussion. We'll have a follow-up or rebuttal opportunity for each candidate. Candidates are instructed to not use their time during a question to readdress a previous question. If they do so, I, as moderator, will instruct the candidate to stay on the topic of the question. Now, at the end of our program, each candidate will be allotted 2 minutes to give their final message to voters. We'll allow each candidate a few extra seconds to wrap up if they're at that 2-minute mark, but we will stop the candidate if too much time has been taken. Once again, we had a blind draw to determine our order for tonight, and Lori will be giving the first answer to our first question. And the first question, talk about why voters in your district should vote for you as opposed to your opponent.
All right. I thank you for having me tonight. I believe that I have the knowledge and the experience that goes with this job. Working in the auditor's office for 16 years gave me the understanding of the real estate, the elections, the drainage districts. I also worked closely with the recorder's office, the assessor's office during with the real estate. And as we know, when you're at a job for a long time, there are ways around to know how to speak like the language, to ask the questions to get the answers that you need. I know how to where to go get those answers, how to get those questions, where to send people instead of having them have to go to several different spots before they are directed to the correct spot. I also, with my being born and raised on the farm, and my farming background helps me with the rural communities. And born and raised here, still have the family farm, and very accessible to my constituents. And I do this full time, and I totally enjoy it.
All right. Carl, your answer.
Well, as a lifelong resident of Cerro County with almost 3 decades of community service, I've developed a skill set that has prepared me for this job. As a firefighter paramedic, I learned how to make split-second decisions and handle myself with the public in a positive and professional manner. As a shift lieutenant, I developed personnel management skills and conflict resolution both internally and externally. As a training officer, I developed and delivered training to all city employees to meet OSHA standards for safety and security. As a chief officer, I prepared budgets. I had to base these off revenue streams. I had to present where I was within the budget on a biweekly basis to the chief to present to the city council as needed. And I have a very good track record of fiscal responsibility and while providing a high quality service to the community. When I started the deputy chief position, which gave me the authority to oversee all expenditures, revenue, and that such, it was right before COVID happened. So I did this during a very volatile time. And that really prepared me for adversity when there's conflict and all the different things that happened with COVID. So, with all of these experiences, I have developed that skill set. I have the time, I have the experience, and I have the passion to hit the ground running as a supervisor.
We're going to go into our next question, and without going into multiple issues, and if you do so, I will interrupt and ask that you stay focused to one. What is the single most important issue surrounding the government of Cerro County today? Carl, you start.
Well, there are so many issues that we could talk about, but what I really want to concentrate on is the first thing that I would do if I get elected into this office, and that is to increase transparency and accessibility to local government. Right now, the meetings for the supervisors are on Mondays at 10 o'clock in the morning. You go to the website and you can find the pack or the agenda 24 hours ahead of time as required by state law. And sometimes there's the claims, which is the checks that have been written out for that time period also. But there isn't anything else. There's a packet that's also available that explains everything within that agenda, and it is not available to the general public unless you go in and request it. I have done that. I went in and requested it, and I do get it, but it's just not something readily available. So then the meetings themselves at 10 o'clock on Monday mornings are hard to access for people that work during the day. Anybody that would like to be informed with their local government should have the opportunity to see this either as a live stream and recorded to be watched later, such as this program right here, or posted 24 hours later on a YouTube channel is what Worth County does. And Worth County, with the resources they have, the county just north of here, and the limited resources, they're able to do that and have it accessible for their constituents. With this, it will create less confusion and less questions about the local government when you actually have access to see what they're doing. And that'd be the first thing that I would try to implement as supervisor.
Lori?
So the question was for local government, what's the most pressing problem?
Without going into multiple issues, what is the single most important issue surrounding the government of Cerro County?
Well, there is a lot of things, but I do think that we have a lot of positives going on in Cerro County. And I think one thing that we need to continue working on, and we need to start building unity. We need to start using all the resources that are available to us, and everyone have it in the same, because we're always looking out how do we go here, where do we go there. If we just all combine our resources together, I think that would be very useful toolbox for everyone. I've been to a lot of different meetings and realizing that we do all interact together and we intertwine. And if we can all be together, there'd be a savings to the taxpayers, and we can all come together on that. Those would be working very closely with the other cities, even the rural cities that sometimes those are not included in on that. We need to make sure all the information is getting out to the rural areas too, and to all the school districts that are in the school and within this county.
Carl, you have any follow-up on that?
Yeah, I agree that the information needs to be out there, and that's why my main topic was transparency and accessibility for government. So that way, all the information is there, so we avoid conspiracy theories and confusion with your government.
Lori, you have any thoughts on the packet being more available, posting it online like Mason City does, or having video of the meetings?
No, I believe that I thought that that those were laws were being changed, that they do have to starting after the fiscal year, or don't they have to start being filmed? I thought that that was something that they were talking about. Possibly we'll have to invest in an owl so that we can put that out there on there and make sure that when we're switching around rooms to rooms, because we're not always in the same room due to elections being held and stuff, that those can be used in that is accessible.
Next question, to what level should a county supervisor be involved in the day-to-day operations of the courthouse and the different departments? Lori, we'll have you start.
Well, the departments are elected by the citizens and taxpayers of Sarasota County. They have their own offices and they know how to run them. As supervisors, we have other responsibilities. We do not need to micromanage the elected officials. We are there for their support. They can come to us and ask us for support. They can ask us, what can we do differently with the budget? Can you support us on this? But really, we have a great group there. And what we need to do as supervisors, we need to be more involved with the community, bringing the cities together, working that way.
Carl?
By statute, the supervisors have limited say in the day-to-day operations of departments that are headed by an elected official. Now, there are departments such as engineering and IT that are directly under the supervisors, and they do have day-to-day say in what happens. Now, where the supervisor does have control of is the budget process, and during the budget process, okaying and approving the budget to appropriate funds. Once the funds are appropriated to an elected official's department, the supervisors cannot legally deny a claim or even tell them how to run their operations. So the key is having excellent people in the positions to run their departments efficiently.
Lori, any response, follow-up on that?
No, I think that that's what I covered with the responsibility of the offices.
All right, we'll move on to the next question then. And Carl, we'll start with you. How important is the role of supervisors in dealing with economic development?
Well, it's a very important thing for the supervisors to be highly involved. Right now, Mason City or Cerro County sits at the intersection of Highway 18, which is Avenue of the Saints, and Interstate 35. We have a regional airport, we have a regional hospital here, and we have a resort town 10 miles away. So we have a lot of resources and things to attract people to Cerro County. Now, the Economic Development Corporation, along with the Chamber and others, are all actively trying to pursue businesses and to help with expansion and bringing people to our area. Now, the supervisors do have some tools. They have some very powerful tools, and that is establishing urban renewal and urban revitalization areas that would provide access to tax abatements or the use of tax increment financing to help with development or expansion of businesses and housing developments. And just because most people aren't probably familiar with tax increment financing, it's not raising the taxes after the development starts. It's taking the additional tax funds and putting them back into the project. And that will can offset some of the costs for the developer, and it eventually increases the tax base for the county to increase revenue.
Lori?
Yes, what Carla said is correct. Also, we got to make sure that we realize that the county has say within the county. Outside of the county, within the city limits and stuff, those are governed by their own council. But we can all work together and come up with a great plan that we can all get the economic development going. I believe that there has been some of those already been in place, and we are working towards that. Clear Lake's doing a wonderful job. Mason City's had a housing redevelopment right west of the courthouse where they were able to do some rehousing development there and some tax abatements and stuff going on. So all those stuff has already been in place and we are doing that as the supervisors already. So yeah, I do agree with Carl because that is something that we are doing.
All right. Any follow up, Carl? We'll move on then. Next question. Lori, we'll start with you. The county this year went through the process of addressing the future of wind and solar energy in the county. Talk about your position on wind and solar energy.
Okay, yes, we did. We have planning and zoning who set up many meetings, small meetings, so the community could go to those. And there's a lot of feedback at those. A lot of citizens came forward and talked what their feelings was about this. They planning and zoning. I attended those meetings, and planning and zoning had put a 100-page report in front of the supervisors. We do have a moratorium in place, and so we have not made a decision on that. So I don't think speaking more further on this would be, since all the supervisors have not came to that conclusion. But my feeling is that no matter how we see it, I'm not here for my feelings. I'm here for the people who voted me in. I am their voice. We need to listen to what they want. No matter how we feel on anything, we need to remember it's not us that we're voting for. It's for our constituents who we are voting for.
Carl?
Well, with any project like this, we need to look at the positives and the negatives. And there are positives of wind and solar, and there are negatives also. So the positives, it increases the tax base within the county, and it can increase revenue for landowners. But that being said, there are negatives, and the negatives are a lot of unknowns. There are drainage issues that would have to be taken care of if you have a large solar farm and you have a tile rupture and it needs to be repaired. You need to get big equipment in to take care of it. How is that going to happen? Is there a plan in place? Also, there's offsets, aesthetics. There are so many questions and less answers than we have questions. So, just as my opponent said, I agree. We represent the people. We represent the people of well, not just our district, but the entire county. And I went to several of those meetings too, and there was very minimal support for any wind or solar. There was a lot of negative. Now, I do respect landowners' rights, but when everything I've heard has been negative, it's really hard for me to try to support something that would be going against the constituents, because that's what we are here to represent.
Lori, any follow up on this issue?
No, in my flyer, I do say I believe agriculture should stay agriculture within Cerro County. That is our main, in the county, that's our main industrial.
Any final comments, Carl?
Yeah, just as far as solar goes, I think wind we have a little more information, but solar is a big unknown. And I would like to see studies about the urban jungle. Why aren't we trying to use some of the area that's already out of production because of urban sprawl to try to maximize solar? That's just an idea. I would like to see some more studies done before we make a decision.
Well, looking at our next issue, it's about carbon capture pipelines. They've been in the forefront in the last few years, with one of the biggest issues being eminent domain around them. Now, let's set aside the eminent domain segment of this issue, though, as one of the biggest reasons the carbon capture process is being proposed is the potential growth for ethanol plants and creating sustainable aviation fuel, with the carbon capture pipeline method being the most cost-effective process of the manufacturing process for this type of fuel. To have individual ethanol plants store the removed carbon on their own is cost prohibitive. What's your message to the biofuels production companies currently in the county, a third biofuels company that has plans for a facility here, as well as the farmer suppliers of those plants who want to move their product into this next phase of ethanol's future?
Agriculture is a huge part of our economy, and we need to support agriculture. There's no question there. But the pipeline to capture carbon is just like the solar and wind. We have to look at positives and negatives. So the positive is a possibility, or the possibility of increased revenue from grain. And that is a big part of our economy. So that has some weight. And then there's a possibility of decreased atmospheric carbon, whether that's as big a deal or not, that is for the experts to know. But it's a very large project, and it relies on multiple landowners across multiple counties, across multiple states. There are so many moving parts to this, it's hard to make everybody happy. Also, there is risk. Anytime there's a pipeline, there's risk. Even though CO2 is a very inert gas, extremely inert, but there are some dangers when it's under that kind of pressure. And being an asphyxiant, the perfect storm could happen to where there would be issues possibly causing death. So there are issues there to deal with. But actually, as a county supervisor, I don't know if we would even have a say whether it comes through. That's more the state level, state legislature, and the Iowa Utilities Board is where the lobbyists need to spend all their time, and they are spending their time. They're not spending their time with the supervisors. And if it does come through, and we do have the pipeline here, and we can't stop it or we can't promote it because of the supervisor's level, it's out of our scope of authority, I would use my 28 years of experience of training as a responder in a hazardous material unit that has responded to pipeline emergencies and has trained extensively in pipeline emergencies. I would use that experience to try to protect landowners and protect the citizens of Cerro Gordo County to mitigate the risk as much as possible.
Laura, your turn on this.
All right. There is a lot of unknown about the CO2, and there's a lot of fear behind it. We say that we do need to help provide the grain is a big thing and support for the farmers, but also the safety of our citizens and the safety of the people who have to live around that CO2 pipeline. No one really wants it. There's a lot of fear and unknown that goes with it. No, as supervisors, yeah, there's not a lot that we can do to stop it, but there is a lot that we can get our voice out there. We can be heard. We can put our ideals down. We can fight this. We can get behind the citizens that are there. We can go to those meetings. We can support our constituents. We can listen to them. We can write down everything. We can write letters. We sign stuff to the IU utility boards that we did not agree with them. We didn't want this. We didn't believe that they could use. I know you said we can't do intimate domain, but we did sign letters that said that no, we don't want this. We're not in agreement with it. So yes, and we would have to put in with our emergency management team. Would have to, if it come through, we'd have to really do some training and on that and make people more safe. But the fear is there, and the fear is real.
Carl, any follow up?
No, I agree.
All right, we'll move on to the next question then. And during the League of Women Voters candidate forum earlier this month, the issue of salaries for elected officials was brought up. The supervisors have agreed to freeze their salaries for a number of years while agreeing to salary increases for their fellow elected officials as recommended by the county's compensation board. Would you continue the supervisors' pay-free policy in the near future, and what kind of salary increases should be agreed to for the other elected officials? And Lori, we'll have you start.
Well, the elected officials usually get like right around what the other workers get. The union workers and the county elected officials are usually go pretty much hand in hand. Sometimes it's a little bit higher, but like we said at the League of Women's Voters, and I said too, if the supervisors were to get a 3% raise, that would be less than $5,000 a year. And if the county if people look closely at that $5,000 a year, then I think that we have more problem with the budget than $5,000 for a 3% raise. Now, we also people who do this full time, like me, we also, we pay for our insurance. We have to pay for the other things that come out of that. So, I mean, but right now, I would support it. So,
Carl?
Pay for elected officials was was a recommendation from the compensation board is the way it was done in the past. That has been dissolved. And because of that, the supervisors have full authority to give their self raises and raises to the other elected officials. So anytime there's any kind of negotiation or setting rates, comparables need to be looked at, comparing apples to apples to see where you lie. So the other elected officials besides supervisor, that would be just a very standard thing to try to have a cost of living increase to keep up as good as we can with inflation and try to make them equal to the comparables in the same type situations. Now, really the same thing should be done for supervisor also. Right now, I looked through the supervisor wages and rates versus population. And right now, it seems we might be just a little bit on the high side. And if that's the case, after the studies are all completed that we would do before we would make decisions, I would be just fine with keeping the salary what it is until the comparables would catch up, and then continue a cost of living raise after that to be right on par with the comparables.
Lori, a follow up?
Yeah, I do know that those comparables have been done. I don't know how long those have. When's the last time those comparables were done? We are looking at maybe doing a comparable throughout the whole courthouse.
Carl, any?
Well, just my research with the comparables with 2024 data, fiscal year 2024 data, just going by population and salary, it puts Cerro County at $3.71 per person of population. The next closest sized town would be Clinton, Iowa at $3.05 per person. Muscatine, $3.65 per person, which is very, very close to what Cerro Gordo's is. But it looks like we're just barely on the high side, maybe for the closest comparables. And then when you get to a higher population, obviously it gets cheaper, and it's not really a true comparison. But those are a couple of comparables right about the same size. So,
all right, we'll go on to the next question. As following up from the previous question, we talked about the elected officials. Let's talk about the salaries of common county employees and talk about, in general, your views on the future pay increases for county employees. And if you could address all employees outside of the sheriff's office for the time being with this question, we'll focus on that department in a separate question. Carl, you start.
Well, it's a different employee pool than it was 30 years ago when I tested for a government job. The attitude of, well, you take it or go work somewhere else, that people were told back when I was first starting, that doesn't work, and it shouldn't. We have to be fair, we have to be honest, and we have to give people a living wage. But when I started in a career in government, I took a pay cut to come to the job, to work for the city. But the benefit package was higher, so it's just the hourly rate was less. Traditionally, over the years, hourly rates would be slightly less in a government job, but the benefit packages would be higher, which actually equals out to being very comparable. And that's what we need to do. We need to make sure we keep a good, solid benefits package that gives you the safety and security to raise a family and to make a living and have a pension. So we need to be very careful with trying to cut. We have to pay people what they're worth and honest wages to have quality personnel within the county.
Lori?
Well, since I've been with the county for so long, when I first was employed with the county, we had the benefit package of retirement. So that went for when I was hired, we got very low wages. A lot of the a lot of the staff are still there. And after 13 years of being there, that benefit packet was taken away, even though we did not get that big a raise through that time. So I have a person there who has been there 30 some years that is only making maybe $1.13 more an hour than a person who just started. So I think we really need to really look at that benefit packet, because we need to retain people that have been there, who has been experienced and don't need the training. We do have we had 75 people apply for a position in the treasurer's office. So the pool is there. They do like that. Where I'm noticing right now, the generation that they're looking at, generation that they come to, they don't really worry about the packet, the benefit packet. They're not worrying about retirement. What they want is they want vacation and they want the pay. That's what they're the here and now. That's what the generation is. But we really need to focus on what we have now and how we continue to support the people that are there.
Carl, follow up.
Yes, and with everything being funded by taxpayers, it's also a balancing act between fair wages and increased taxes and responsible use of the tax money. So it's always very, very touchy subject. It's nobody wants to increase taxes, but we have to pay a fair wage to have fair wage to have quality people. So.
Lori, any follow up before we move on?
That is why, as a supervisor, I did not fill 2 positions so that we could have more money in the budget. We didn't fill when I left the auditor's office. We did not fill my position. Planning and zoning, when that position came open, then no one really applied for it. So that was taken over by the HR and Michelle in that office. And it's not getting paid out as much as it. So we are really saving money on employment. And so I'm also asking the elected officials that when an opening comes in their office, take a look and see whether or not we need to fill it. Public health does a really great job with this. That's where we're taking a look at that. And as the people do not realize, but the treasurer's office is already down 1 staff. From when I started, they would have been at extra staff, and they're down. So we really are running less staff. So our employment, what we pay out for employment, is less than what it was.
Bob, since she brought up another subject, can I have a say?
Okay, we'll have another back and forth here. So go ahead.
This is something that she has on her flyers, so I did a little research into it. The planning and zoning personnel resigned and was not replaced at a wage of $52,900 and some dollars a year. The responsibility was given to the HR director. The HR director took a raise of $36,548 to take that position. Then an HR specialist was hired because the HR director needed help because of the extended and extra responsibilities of planning and zoning. And the HR specialist was hired at a wage of $64,272. So the savings to taxpayers by realigning positions within the county offices actually cost the taxpayers an extra $47,910.
Lori, you want to respond to that?
Yes, no, that's not correct, because for many years, the HR department had a part-time position that was never filled. There was always a part-time person. We just never filled that. That position has been empty for at least 9 years, because that is we just never filled that as a part-time. So that HR assistant really is only was already had that half already in there. So that was something that you missed.
All right, we're gonna move on because I want to.
I've got a very relevant rebuttal to
that. I'll let you go back and forth one more time. So go ahead, and we'll have Lori respond after that once again.
Also, on June 18th, 2022, there were 249 employees for the county, and then there were 253 employees in October of this year. And you were stating that there are less employees for less cost than there was when you started.
Lori?
Within the courthouse.
All right, we're going to move on. During the recent League of Women Voters candidate forum that you participated in, the candidates for sheriff discussed the issue of employee recruitment and retention. Do the supervisors and future budgets need to budget more money to try to address this, especially when both candidates say that deputies in some of the surrounding counties are making $20,000 to $25,000 a year more than what's being offered here in Cerro County? Lori, you start.
I've always been in support of the deputies. They leave their families to come protect ours. They are at a high risk job. They are out there. They're dealing with all different cases, all different hours. We need to look at that very closely. We need to make sure that we are keeping them and that those positions are filled. Not only those, but our dispatch also. Our dispatch is really hard. It's a hard job and it's a hard position to keep filled. And our jailers also.
Carl?
Just like I said earlier with comparables, it's something that you need to look at the comparables and see how they line up and make sure you treat them fair for retention and recruitment. In recent years, the Mason City Police Department has been traditionally losing employees to the county, and then the county will lose those same employees or other employees to the state. So it's kind of a revolving door of employees in the public sector, especially the law enforcement right now. So we need to make sure we create the environment for them to thrive, and that includes a good comparable benefit package and wage to try to retain and recruit those employees.
Laura, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, that what he said is very concerning because when the city is losing it to the county, that means the city is also struggling with the filling those positions. We all need to start working together on that and making it very strong, making it safe community for everyone.
Carl, final follow-up?
Yes, and the odd thing about that is the city law enforcement starts significantly higher and pays significantly higher, but people are quitting that to go to the county. So it's not just pay. We have to make sure we have the proper environment too.
Next issue, property taxes are an ongoing issue as new property tax laws were enacted by the legislature in 2023 that provided property tax relief starting this fall while limiting local government spending. Rumors are starting to fly about legislation being introduced in the upcoming session that could limit cities and counties to a hard 2% growth, as well as other changes to the local option sales tax. What impacts does the county face in the near future, and what has been enacted and what possibly could be enacted? Carl, we'll start with you.
Well, it's always a changing system, and the supervisors have to stay on their toes to be able to keep up with it. The cap on the taxes can be concerning. It's a wonderful thing that we have protection as property owners from out of control taxes, and that's what the legislature at the state level did. They passed these, like House File 718 was passed. That's the one you were describing, and it will help protect people from the taxes increasing too much. But if our costs for employee costs and other costs go up faster than because of high inflation, there will be limited funds to make sure we are able to provide all the services. So we have to be very careful. It's a balancing act. We have to be very careful with that. So the thing we have to do is really capitalize on alternative revenue streams such as grants and the such to try to make ends meet and do more with less at sometimes. Other changes would be in the mental health system. The CICS system apparently is going to be changing. Nobody really knows what's going to happen, and we need to be very proactive to make sure we stay on top of that and help mitigate any changes or adapt to any changes that take place. Right now, it's a complete unknown, so we just have to really pay attention.
Laura, your response?
Okay, so yes, the tax and the House file, they are coming down and making it so the taxes are different. But we got to remember that the state determines the rollback and that the local taxing authorities at the levy rate. And we as a county have been our budget has been good, and that is why our levy rates has stayed the same. And we need to make sure we have those in place. Now, you said that CICS and mental health, we do have the opioid money that's coming into the county, which the public health has taken over. They're doing a great job. We also need to make sure that that money is being spent the correct way, and they're doing a great job with that and covering the expenses of some of the mental health. When CICS we could not give out money as a county government to other mental health agencies and help them. So there are some rules that our hands are tied on in the mental health range.
Carl, a follow-up?
Yes, and back to the House File 718, with evaluations of property rising with that maximum cap, the levy, it quite possibly could go down significantly. So it would still be a slight rise of revenue, but not enough to keep up with inflation. And that's where we have to be very careful. And the county is in good fiscal shape right now, and we need to make sure we keep it that way. And the opioid funds, I'm also a chair of a committee that is doing research on how we can use the opioid funds to better serve our community. And that is one of the passions of mine that I'm working on outside of my, I started it with my past employment. I've continued on the committee, and whether I am elected to the job of supervisor or not, I'm going to continue that because it's a passion of mine and a need for our community.
Lori, final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm on that same committee that Carl has joined after I was on there. So yeah, I'm very impressed with our opioid thing. I've been down at county supervisor meetings and teaching, getting taught down there. And with the opioids, a lot of the counties didn't know what to do with their opioid funding money. And so we were very blessed that public health took that over. And they're doing a great job with that.
Next question, and Lori, we'll start with you. There's been efforts in Cerro County this past year to help address child care needs. The county approved a $50,000 pledge to support the Cerro County Child Care Works Coalition efforts to address understaffed care centers. What more does the county need to do to continue to address this issue?
We need to continue to support this. How we're going to do that, we need to sit down and think about that again. I sat upon the Child Care Works meetings. I sat with some of those meetings, and this is a very big concern. We cannot get people back into work if there's not places for their daycares. It's all over. We're starting to see it down at the state level too, that this is an issue, that the child daycare is a problem. But we're a pilot program here, and a lot of people are starting to ask us, starting to ask that committee, how did you do it? They're looking for them to answers and stuff. The May City Chamber is overseeing that, and they're doing a great job. I went down to the day at the Hill at the Capitol and talked more about that and trying to get people at the legislation level to make sure that they continue to fund and make sure that Cerro County is not forgotten. I am a voice that will not go away.
Carl?
Yes, the Child Care Works program was provided by a grant from a foundation to try to find a solution for the problems that Lori was talking about, very real problems. And what they kind of came up with so far is to subsidize wages at $2 an hour for healthcare, or not healthcare, but for daycare providers, to help stimulate the wages to try to attract more people. It looks that the capacity is here for a significant more higher amount of children to be in daycare, but the workforce isn't there, and that is very common across every field right now. So that was the first part. And the second part of what the Child Works is trying to do is come up with a long-term solution and looking at maybe increasing the status of the child care profession to try to make it a little higher wage profession. And that's what they're trying to do. But one other thing as a supervisor that I would really like to look into as for childcare is we need to look to the county to the south of us. Sukup Manufacturing has an in-house child care service, and they have done just amazing work with people being able to bring their children to the workplace and make sure that they're taken care of properly right there, just on the other side of the wall from where they're working. And it makes it very convenient for families, and it makes it convenient for the daycare providers also. So I would really like to facilitate groups to learn from Sukup Manufacturing and bring it to manufacturing and business within our county.
We've got about 10 minutes left before we get to closing statements, and I want to try to get as many of these questions I have as possible before we go to that. So we'll move on to the next question. Carl, we'll start with you. Infrastructure, things that need to be addressed with county infrastructure at this time.
Well, our county is The infrastructure, we have the buildings, the facilities for the maintenance sheds, the engineering, the courthouse, and roads and bridges. Right now, we have about 750 miles of gravel roads, about 250 miles of paved roads, along with approximately 259 bridges. It's always work in progress to keep up on these things, but we're in pretty good shape right now. We have a maintenance shed in Rockwell and Doherty that needs some attention. Has been some talk of maybe replacing some. It's something to look into, but also we might be able to get by with just a fix so that way we're not building all new maintenance sheds at the same time. But it seems to be the biggest issue with the infrastructure is more of the equipment, and that would be like the road graders and dump trucks and things of that nature. They're very expensive. They have almost doubled in price in the last 5 years. Since COVID, it really messed up everything as far as supply chains and timeframes. So what you used to be able to get in 5 months now takes 2 years. So it's something you have to really stay on top of for replacement schedules, because it's a 2-year wait to have anything replaced.
Lori?
I agree that the infrastructure is in good spot. One of the infrastructure that needs to really have attention that no one has ever brings up, because you can't stand beside it and take a picture and say, "Hey, look what I fixed," is our county tile. We have a lot of county tile, and right now we don't know. Anyone can hook up into that county tile. So if we have a 30-inch main, having a couple 18-inch tile going into that, right now we're in a dry spot. When that comes with heavy rain, that 30-inch tile is not going to be able to take all that 18-inch tile going into it. We're going to see a lot more suck holes. We need to start building that infrastructure, because we're going to have to do something about it sooner or later. It's in the ground. We need to start figuring out how to replace that county tile and help out everyone. Like we said, agriculture is our main staple. And what that we have outside the county is more ag land than so that's what we need to start taking care of. And need to start looking at that.
Lori, as we move on to the next question, the front entry improvements are just completed to the courthouse. Some other things are going on inside the courthouse with remodeling and whatnot. Does the county need to start looking at the future of the courthouse, or the improvements such as the ones currently being made and having been completed, moving that courthouse building in the right direction?
Right now, I know that we had to do that front entrance. We had to do that to be able to put a metal detector in to make sure that we are safe inside that courthouse. Safety is our main goal. We bought the SH building, which is the west wing, the other building. So we own the whole block now. Cerro County owns the whole block. I would just say that we need just to continue forward with what we have and work with that, because I know people always say, well, what about the principal building? Why would we take the biggest building, the biggest tax building off the tax rolls and put that onto non-tax?
Carl?
Well, I agree. After the purchase of the building directly behind the courthouse, it has allowed for future expansion and alleviates some of the crowding. The courthouse right now, with interviewing different department heads and spending time there in the last several months asking people what they thought of the facility, it seems to be adequate. It might not be always what they want, but it seems to be adequate for the job that is being performed. Some of the complaints are the expenses of the HVAC system, generator system, the electrical system. These are all complaints and cause some hiccups here and there that have to be monitored and replaced as needed. But otherwise, the building itself, I think, is adequate for the time being.
All right. Next question: conservation. What needs to be addressed with county conservation and land use, Carl?
County conservation, they've done an excellent job making more river accesses and putting more recreational land into on the county for the public to use. There's been some things coming through the legislature to limit what government can do to buy ground, to put money into ground, so they're not competing with farmers for farm ground to take it out of service. So there's some laws there that we're going to have to stay on top of. But for the most part, the ground that goes to the county for recreational space is ground that is willed and donated to the county. And every situation is different with different stipulations within the gifting of the land. And our county conservation department has done a very good job maintaining and increasing our opportunities.
Lori?
I agree with everything Carl says. I just need to add that I went to a meeting out at Conservation. As a full-time supervisor, I attend a lot of different meetings, and at that one, we realized that our REAP programming was out of date, and that was state dollars, state grant dollars, $12.5 million of state grant dollars. So what I did with the help of other people, we got key players to the table and we rewrote that REAP plan. And now starting as January 1st, we're able to go after that $12.5 million in grant dollars, which it goes towards conservation, roadside vegetation, recreation. I took over my goal was everyone did separate areas. I did Plymouth and Rock Falls. We could put in great, big, huge big goals. And my big goal was to put in a bike path from Plymouth to Rock Falls to connect it to the Nyack trails. That was our big plan. Also, Conservation has done a great job with Strand Park up in Plymouth. I also encouraged Josh, Conservation, to reach out to Worth County Casino to see whether or not they would give some money to that. And Worth County Casino did donate money to a Cerro County park. So that was really great too. And then Josh said if the city of Plymouth would donate, we could also go after more grant dollars. So that's what we did. That's where we start building the unity and the relationships, and we work hard for the taxpayers.
Besides the property tax concerns we addressed earlier, are there any other issues that might be addressed by the legislature in the near future that are concerned to county government? Do you think the state is taking more local control away from county governments? Lori, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, they are because everything rolls down. We're pushing that. We're pushing that we need to have more funding for schools. We need to have more levy for this, but that's all at the state level. We have to follow what the state puts down for us. I mean, our hands are tied on a lot of these things. We wish that we could do more, but there's not a lot. The local option tax and that's what we can do with outside funding. Everything is starting to crunch. It's coming down to crunch time, and people are starting to feel it because our outside fundings, when they have their request, there's less and less that we can give every year.
Carl?
Yes, the scope of authority of a county supervisor, there's a thing called the county home rule, and that means that the counties are allowed to govern as they see fit as long as it is following all of the statutes of the state of Iowa. So that, in other words, we can only do what we can do, and the state's going to tell us what we can do. So that's always been an issue. And over time, there seems to be more statutes that creep a little bit more to limit the options that a county has to do on its own. Right now, like I said earlier, the big things are the restructuring of the CICS, which is the mental health facilities and programs. That is something that is up in the air. We have no idea. We have to be proactive and really make sure we're on top of that. The House File 718 that's already passed, that is going to limit the growth of taxes to protect us. But at the same time, we have to plan and go after alternative funding, such as grant money, as aggressively as we can and streamline operations so we keep ourselves in a good financial place.
Well, we're now at the closing portion of our program this evening, and it's time for each candidate to give you their final pitch on why you should elect them. Once again, each candidate will be allotted 2 minutes to give their final message to voters, and we'll allow each candidate, once again, a few extra seconds to wrap up if they're at that 2-minute mark, but we will stop a candidate if too much time has been taken. With the first closing remark, Lori.
All right. At the League of Women's Voters, all the supervisors said that they realized that they agreed that this should not be a party affiliated position. I am a Democrat and I'm running on the Democrat ticket. However, if this was not an elected position, if we were going on just a job, like Carl said in he had to be tested for a government job. You have to pass that. I have the 16 years of experience with the auditor's office, 2 as your full-time supervisor. I would be hired on experience alone. So I appreciate everyone's support on November 5th to continue to be your dedicated supervisor with the knowledge behind me that it does not learn overnight. Carl has things on budget that is totally different than how how the county budget is done. So I have been there and I've seen it and I have good relationships. And I just, like I said, experience is knowledge.
All right. Carl?
Yes, experience is knowledge. And my experience with writing budgets, managing budgets, overseeing budgets, and revenue streams from the level of having to present it to the council is imperative to be able to understand how to see it from the other side and to be able to appropriate funds properly by understanding the entire budget process from both sides. And that experience gives me an advantage in the budget process. And that is one of the biggest jobs of the supervisors, appropriating funds for department budgets. I also have retired from my full-time position, and I do have the time to dedicate to what's needed to the county for this job. I have the time, I have the energy, I have the ambition, I have the passion to step in and hit the ground running.
Candidates, I want to thank you once again for agreeing to join us tonight for a discussion of the county level issues. And our viewers tonight, for a reminder to join us after the polls close next Tuesday night on our radio stations as well as here on NorthIowaNow.com for election night results from local and statewide races. You've been watching our discussion with the candidates running for the 3rd District seat on the Cerro County Board of Supervisors, as this has been a presentation of Koloff Media here in Mason City and of NorthIowaNow.com News. I'm News Director Bob Fisher, and we wish you a good evening.